Hello, I'm Angela England, and I'm the moderator of the self-publishing panels. We have with us two amazing authors that are going to share their self-publishing tips and secrets with you today. The first is Crystal Storm, who is the science fiction author of the Synarchy series, The Awakening Book 1, The Ascension Book 2, and it's currently in the process of writing the third book in the series. So she's going to be sharing her creative process with readers and other writers. And she successfully ran a crowdfunding campaign to help get her novels into print. So I look forward to picking her brain about that.
Hello.
We also have with us Jamie Weaver, multi-genre author with 5 published books to date. Her titles include both nonfiction and fiction writing. So look for her nonfiction books, Witchcraft, Beginner's Guide to Secular and Non-Secular Witchcraft, and 2 contemporary fiction novels, Anything and A Burning Bridge, as well as poetry collections, Storm in My Teacup and Other Poems, and Anarchic Flux and Other Poems. Currently, she's working on a psychological horror novel, a cyberpunk novel, and a 3rd poetry collection, which kind of answers the question for Jamie about whether she works on one piece at a time or multiple pieces at a time.
Oh yeah, I don't think I could stick on just one if my life depended on it.
I love that. Yeah, I am Angela England. I have 5 kids and I live with my husband in Oklahoma. My writing up till now has primarily focused on nonfiction works, and I have published just about every way you can possibly publish, from small indie publisher to traditional publishing house. I published my first book with Alpha Books and then jumped over into self-publishing and ghostwriting. So I've done a little bit of everything, with primarily focused on web writing and blogging. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how we each approach marketing a little bit differently and how we approach our writing process. So I know the first question that a lot of writers or potential writers have is about writing routines. Now, each of you, I would like to hear from you your writing process. Do you write every day? Do you plan what you're going to write? How do you stay focused on your various works, especially if you have more than one? And would you consider yourself more of a plotter or a pantser?
So many questions. So many.
Yeah.
You want to go first, Jamie? You've written more books, so I'm going to let you go first.
Oh, that does not mean anything.
It means that your writing routine is probably like 1,000 times better than mine.
Oh no. Well, that's the thing is, I get that question quite a bit, like, oh, what's your writing routine like? And I'm like, writing routine? What? Because I don't have a schedule. I don't make myself sit down and write every day. I try to do some form of writing every day, like journaling or just, like little snippets of lines I want to put in poetry, but I never sit down in front of my computer and work on something dedicated every day. It's more just whatever comes to me in that moment. I'm very, I want to say creativity driven, but that's not exactly what I'm looking for. I guess it's more just when the mood strikes me, and then I just work on whatever I'm in the mood to work on, which is why I bounce back and forth between so many projects at once. And it's not a great strategy to have for marketing or for being successful, because that's why it takes sometimes 2 years to get one manuscript finished, just the raw manuscript. So yeah, that's my lack of a writing routine.
I can relate to not having a routine. I have 5 kids. So we don't do anything I don't even get to shower every day, never mind write every day, hardcore.
That's crazy.
I used to be very dedicated, 1,000 words a day minimum, but there are certain things that I do every day. And I think feeding that creative side of you every day is important as a writer, whether that is exposing myself to some new information or new art that I wouldn't normally consume, or journaling. And recently, just in the last couple of years, I took back up like painting even. And I find that sometimes just the act of painting will kind of break free that creative side.
Right.
And then I can turn from that and usually leave the mess on that side of the desk and go and write something out real quick. And that's been really helpful for me to kind of get in that creative mood by doing a physical art. I find that that's helpful in just kind of letting go of that analytical side and tapping into that creative side of my brain. What about you, Crystal? What does your writing look like?
Yeah, I am. I feel like we're going to give some really great tips for self-publishing authors because I don't really have one either. I'm a content creator. I am also a web designer. So so I'm on, that work from home life. So I'm constantly, hustling for jobs and work but you want the writing to be the thing, but it's just not, so everybody knows the struggle. Everybody, I don't need to go into, everybody knows the struggle. I will find though that I follow two really awesome writers on Twitter. I follow more than that. I follow a bunch, but Jake Kristoff, I don't know if anybody's ever read any of his work. He's like a machine. He's like an internationally best-selling author, and he writes like 5,000 words a day. So I'm like, no freaking way. And then I also follow, V.E. Schwab, and she put up this great tweet one day where she talks about how, her books were written in just 20-minute segments. And that made me feel so much better about my life, when she said that she just wrote for like 20 minutes at a time. So I was just like, yes. I will say, I'm very organic. I don't really outline. My scenes are all over the place. Scrivener is my god now because it's such a great, I'm sure we'll get into that later, but it's such great for organizing scenes, especially when you don't write linear. And I will say that to get myself in the mood, I listen to epic music. Like it's something like I was trying to write last night and I just wanted to write. I knew I needed to put, just 20 minutes in and I just wasn't feeling it. And then I found some good beats, I put them in my ears and I kicked out like 1,000 words in like 30 minutes.
Nice.
So yeah, writers just don't get in the habit of waiting for creativity to strike us, especially right now when the world is crazy and we're stressed. Like you said, you've got 5 kids or we've got bills to pay and like there's just too many stressors. The muse is not going to come to you. Find a way to put yourself like in that creative space, whether it's like painting or jogging or fucking or like Tai Chi or whatever it might be, or music, however it, that puts you in that space. Just go there and try to at least write 20 minutes a day. I feel like we have to. I know there's like 1,000 other things to do, but I feel like if we can just put in 10 to 20 minutes every day on our craft, then eventually we'll finish the stupid book.
I call it writing in the snippets of time. Because sometimes, as a mother, I just get snippets. That's all I get. Or if you're between gigs and you've got 20 minutes after you finish this article and you're not ready to start on the next client yet, those snippets of time can be really powerful. And if you aren't pressuring yourself like, oh, I have to finish this whole chapter. If you've already said like, whatever I can do in this 15 minutes, that's what I'm going to do. It kind of lets some of that pressure off of you. And you're just kind of like, okay, whatever comes out, comes out. And when you go and sit down and look at it with a more critical eye later, you might keep it, you might not, you might flip it around and fine tune it. And I do love Scrivener, and you can move pieces around. I've started experimenting with Dabble, and you can literally just drag and drop the scenes over. And so that's one thing that I do think a lot of writers underestimate is the power of just writing in that moment when you can. Don't wait for the conditions to be ideal, because they may never be ideal.
Right.
Agree.
Yep, I can attest to that.
After having waited for ideal conditions, this is why there is such a big gap between when I published my second book and me trying to finish this third book.
Right.
So yeah.
I do like what you said about following other writers, or like kind of finding that community. And I think that's one of the things that I hope a lot of people get out of this conference is connecting with other people who are going through that same struggle tapping into that sense of community. Like sometimes writing is such an isolating thing. It's like, you're by yourself, you're doing it. But if you can tap into a group, I used to get together with some people on like IM chat, and we'd all write for 45 minutes, and then we would report back with our word count. And those writing sprints were so motivating because you knew, even though you were by yourself in front of your computer at your desk like a little hermit woman, you still knew that you were going to be tapping into that community and reporting back. So I think if you can make those connections and make those relationships, Twitter, blogs, subscribe to their newsletters, whatever you can do, that's also a very motivating thing.
Big time. I feel like I've always had the struggle finding other writers locally or finding writing groups, you know, and especially ones that work with full-on books, you know, because so many of them, they'll tell you straight out, you know, oh, we only work with short stories or essays because novels are just, it's too much. And so finding the writing community on Twitter has been a godsend. Yeah. Because I also don't have any other writer friends, you know, in person. So it's nice to be able to talk to people about the craft and to realize that, oh, I'm not insane. I'm just a writer, you know, because we all do these same weird little things and stuff.
Seriously, I live in the middle of Oklahoma, like literal middle of nowhere. And there's no one around me who's doing this kind of creative work. But it is funny because I published my first book right after my fifth child was born. And at the soccer park later, like when my book came out, I literally heard one of the other soccer moms introduce me to my friend. Oh, she's a writer. And she was like, oh, that explains it. So
wow.
I totally get what you mean. Like, those online friends, you gotta connect to those people because they get you. Not everyone gets you in real life.
That's true. So true.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I find the Twitter chats for writers to be extremely helpful. There's like some on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and anytime you can jump into those, I find those. I actually, just me personally, I find those to be more helpful than the writing community hashtag on Twitter. Being able to find those actual chats that people are hosting. Twitter's been a godsend, and then I found people through my other content creation stuff. So God bless the internet for connecting us geeks.
Right now, everyone's all isolated. We gotta stay connected. So what would you each say is one of your greatest challenges when it comes to actually producing the book? Taking that writing and producing the actual book, what has that process looked like for you, and what are your biggest challenges that you're overcoming?
So do you mean like the editing is done, it's ready to go, and just the publishing part of it?
I would include editing in that.
Oh, okay.
That's one of my biggest challenges.
The hell that is editing.
Yes. I think that counts.
I like the editing part. See, because so for me, it's going to be just finishing is going to be like so huge. Like getting this thing out there and done again, like that feeling of having a completed work is going to be like, yes. And I love the red lines. I you know what? I don't know if I'm just like crazy, but once my editor gets it, and she's great. She's like so snarky. She doesn't hold back. So I have to have like these amazing, because she's like borderline rude with some of the comments she gives me. It's glorious. It's wonderful. I love it. So her just ripping that thing up, it's like the best, because I'm like, I just need to go through this and then I'm done. And then it's done, and then it's ready. I'm going to give it to some beta readers to see what they think. But it's like the bulk of the work for me, like once that story is put together, it's like a polish. It's like fine tuning that stuff. So I think, just for me, the most challenging thing is just feeling like it's done. Because I know, like, as writers, like, if you ever, like, gone back and read a scene, you're like, I'm just going to read it so I can get, like, a feeling for and then you spend it, like, editing, and then you do the same thing on Tuesday. So, like, you've literally spent 3 days changing a sentence. Like, that's, like, like, you get stuck in those patterns. So, just, the act of just putting it all together, having that polished manuscript. And then, everything after that it's hard. Like, marketing is so hard, and finding readers, and that all stuff is hard. But I feel like just once the manuscript is done, that is the victory lap right there.
Yeah. And you said you don't usually work from an outline, but do you usually have an idea of what you want that book to look like, or what each book is going to cover? You're working on a series.
I am, and I've got ideas in my head for a couple more that are going to be tied into like the overall universe of the book too, which is kind of cool. No, as far as outlines, I've never outlined. It's always been, I'm starting with an idea and then it just kind of goes. And the story normally follows the initial idea that I have. But things just organically grow out of it, like characters and places and ideas. And, I'm still, with this current book, I'm still deciding whether or not I'm going to blow up Earth. I haven't decided yet. So stuff like that.
For us. I don't know. Depending on how the next month goes, you might want to just blow it all up and start over.
I know. Hilariously, there was this whole one scene in my book where I actually removed half of the Earth's population, and then Avengers Endgame came out, and I was like, no, now I have to change it because everybody's going to be like, oh, she's just Thanos snap. And I wrote this before that came out, but nobody cares. So this is crap now. Now I have to change what I wrote because stupid event, even though that was right. I loved it.
Brilliant minds think alike. Maybe we could just talk it
up. Right? I'm suing them. Stealing my ideas.
What about you? What are your challenges?
Well, I do all my editing on my own because I am so broke. I'm actually currently living in my sister's basement, helping her with childcare because she's a nurse. So during all this, she's still working. Oh, wow. So she's putting me up, so that's great. But that means that I don't have that extra person to help me out. And so I do all the editing myself, which sometimes I really love. Like when I was writing A Burning Bridge, I loved the editing process because I was just so in love with each character and each of their own personalities and experiences. And it was fun for me to do that. But then other books, like my nonfiction book about witchcraft, that one, it's so much more dry and technical. And so that one is not as fun to edit. But I have to agree with Crystal that the hardest part is to feel like it's done, because when I was going through my novels, editing them 10 times, and then finally feeling like, okay, they're perfect, this is great. And then I put it out there, and then a year later I pick it up to reread it just because, I miss my characters or whatever. And I find typos or things that don't make sense and just,
crazy.
Crap. It feels like it's never totally done. And I think that's my biggest struggle. I think I just need to learn to put it down and it's good and just leave it alone, unless it's so much to the point where I do need to put out a second edition, which I'm working on one now. So.
Yeah. Well, lest anyone think that doesn't happen when you go with a traditional publisher, my first book, The Table of Contents, is chapter 1, chapter 3, chapter 3, and it drives me nuts to this day. That happens with real publishing too.
Drive me crazy. I found typos in professionally edited books too before.
Oh,
so
yeah.
So at this point, I'm just like.
This particular book had multiple editors. We had copy editor. We also had a technical editor, and it was it was a whole thing. It wasn't just red lines on my document. I had red, blue, yellow, green. It was very colorful for that author. Nobody caught it.
Oh
I didn't catch it. I checked that the table of contents was accurate to what I had originally outlined, but so it happens. It definitely happens. I don't know. I think in the quilting world, they always say that the quilters will make a mistake on purpose, so the quilt's not perfect. And that shows that it was made with love and that it was made by a human. So we're just going to go with that. That's what
I like that. I like that a lot.
It's like our style.
Yes.
See, I will forget entire words when I write. So this is one of the reasons why I need, I find when I'm editing, I need to read things out loud to catch my typos. Otherwise, because what it's supposed to say, your eyes will you won't catch it.
Yeah.
Even if I put something down and come back to it, I will still miss stuff. And I literally, sometimes my brain just moves too fast. whole words will be missing. And I'll just,
Yes.
so I have to read aloud when I'm reviewing things. Otherwise, it's no point.
Totally. I actually think that that's a really good way to edit, especially if you're editing your own work. Just pick it up with a fresh set of eyes and read it out loud. And if you kind of stumble over a part, then it's like, okay, that needs a little extra something. Now, what do you guys do for things like cover designs and the more technical pieces? Are you hiring that out or outsourcing that in some way? Or are you trading with a friend, or what are you guys doing for that?
So with my editor, it was awesome because I bartered with her. She needed a website and I'm a web designer. So that's why I got my books edited, which is awesome. With the cover designer, because I can write, but I cannot even draw a stick figure. I have tried to do some editing templates, but because like the book cover is so important, I was like, let me stop pretending that I know what I'm doing. So with that, I actually found somebody who was reasonably priced that I could afford, did that. With the interior design, I'll use a template. That, I hate formatting for ebooks. It is the bane of my existence. Oh my God, I hate it so much. Like some people are like, oh, it's so easy. And I'm just like, no, it's stupid and I hate it. But I will do. I got like a template off the book designer for the interior format for print and for ebook. So that kind of stuff. But the cover design, because I'm not an artist at all, that I have to. That and the editing, like those are the two things that I have to outsource. I just can't do myself.
What about you, Jamie?
Yeah, I do all of my own covers. I don't really have an eye for art, like at all. So I just kind of put sort of vague covers together, except for Storm in My Teacup and other poems. An ex-boyfriend of mine, he actually drew that up for me. And he let me pay him in pizza. So, that always works too. But
will actually work for food.
Right. But once I actually do have a more steady income, I would like to reach out to indie artists. And then that way they can get their work out there too, and just kind of like a symbiotic relationship sort of thing.
Yeah. I like that. I've used a graphic designer, and I went with the same gal who helped me do my original website branding. And this particular designer, and this is one thing I think to keep in mind if you're looking at hiring somebody, she was able to customize her design according to my branding and my style and my preference. And so it wasn't necessarily cookie cutter. When you look at her client portfolio, they don't all look the same, just with different colors. She did a really good job of making sure that, it reflected my style and my branding more than hers. And I think that that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're working across different genres. There's a certain expectation for that genre that goes beyond just what that one designer or artist does, maybe their personal style. So keep that in mind, because especially if you're doing multiple genres, you'd want to make sure that it fits with the style that readers come to expect and anticipate for that particular style. I know that, Crystal, you said you do a lot of web work. How has that translated into your marketing efforts?
It helped a lot with several things. First, it helped with building my author website, because I feel like that is so important. People have made so much money off of Instagram and YouTube, and I'm all for it. That's great. But what I really want to caution people, especially, authors and content creators that are building their platforms around that, those are rented spaces. This is my little rant for the day. Those are rented spaces. If YouTube changes an algorithm, or even just this thing that just happened on YouTube with Kappa, or Instagram just decides to stop being, as organic searching as they are, your website will be that place where people can find you. So please, please, please have a website. Please have a website. That's it. Please, all authors have a website. Don't just have a social media profile. You need a website. Even Jane Friedman says you need a website, and she knows all. So that was really helpful. Yeah.
I have AngeEngland.com, and I'm Ange England everywhere: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, my website. Yes, I agree with you. I literally bought my kids' domains, some of them before they were born. Nice. So I'm with you on the importance of having your .com.
Do it. Yeah, so that was really helpful in my marketing efforts as well. And especially when I ran my crowdfunding to get my novels into print, I did that all through my website. I literally went over to Kickstarter. I looked at their page and how they were doing things, and I was like, I could literally just build this and save myself 10% that they take, and I get to keep it. So I built it, and that was it, and it worked. And I was like, I mean, I've only got so many followers anyways, and I'm not really big on Kickstarter, so I was reading all the how-tos, and I was like, well, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to see how it works. And it worked really well. It worked out really, really well. So that was amazing. So yes, being kind of knowledgeable in that, knowing about a little bit about social media marketing, even though I hate it and it annoys me, knowing about how to schedule posts, which will really help a writer out a lot. That sort of thing. Yeah, that's all kind of helped with the marketing, even though unlike every other author, I don't like to do it, and it's annoying, and you're just like, come on, I just wrote a book, it's awesome, just read it. Just kind of having that technical know-how on the back end has helped out a lot.
Right.
Jamie, do you keep a website or email newsletter?
So I do have a website and a newsletter, and I do the newsletter through Patreon. But I just leave it, it's free, and if people want to do the donation part, they're welcome to, but it's not required or necessary. And at first I was doing a very long newsletter, like 4 or 5 pages, and then I realized I'm just making more work for myself. Let me just shrink this down to 1 page where it's concise and eye-catching, and so that has proved to be a lot easier. And yeah, I do have the website, and then the social medias. I'm J Weaver Writes on everything. But I also find, I mean, with all indie authors, it's just the marketing is the biggest pain of it all, because I don't really know much about marketing. And so, I mean, even just writing the blurb on the back of the book is such a feat for me. It's very hard to do because it's like, this is a whole world that I created, and you want me to condense it to like a paragraph and a half. Okay. So, that alone is difficult. And then the marketing aspect of it, I'm still finding my way through it, talking to different people. I was really starting to get into it, and then I had to do this big move, and so that's been kind of put on pause until things settle down, because I moved here from the other side of the country and then helped my sister and her family move into a new house, and so we just moved in a few days ago, so It's been kind of crazy.
Yeah, and then you had like a house flood or something. Seemed like,
oh yeah, the kitchen ceiling flooded. That was fun.
Oh my gosh, I do not envy you. Yeah, we just moved. I just moved in too, so yeah, it's rough.
Yeah,
life is
real.
Yeah.
I think that I have kind of the opposite thing in terms of like the whole writing the blurb dilemma. The fiction piece that I'm working on, my first fiction book, I used that kind of hook summary thing to help me fine-tune my plot, because I had this whole world, this whole concept, and I actually ended up, by doing that, brainstorming 3 books in the series. So it was like to help me fine-tune that idea and the concept that I wanted to work on for the first book. Starting with that like elevator pitch was actually very helpful to me, because it helped me narrow down my focus. So I actually started the exact opposite of what you were saying, because I kept that little blurb in mind, and it helped me kind of fine tune my deal there. Now, what is your favorite part of self-publishing for each of you?
I think for me, it's that I have control over everything. Even the marketing aspect of it, as difficult as it is, I have control over it. I don't have to worry about someone saying, like, oh, this might not sit well with a certain part of your audience. And, I don't have to fight on that. I can just, it's my work, it's my baby, and I'm going to put it out there. And so I really like the fact that I am the captain of my ship 100%.
That was me, and that's one of the reasons why I chose to indie publish as well. I grew up in a very kind of corporate background. My mom does contracts and stuff for a living, so before I took myself seriously as a writer, I was kind of in that soul sucking world. So I'm kind of business minded in that sense, even though I really hate marketing. But just the idea was that if I was going to do all this work, I was going to have the creative control over it. And you've been in traditional publishing too, Angela, so I'm pretty sure you can speak to this as well, that even though you could get a traditional publishing deal, there's a lot that comes to that still falls back on you.
Yes.
And I was also thinking, because I follow Joanna Penn, who's also a great resource for indie published authors.
Yes.
She's awesome. And she just talks about, we're just reminding authors about all the rights that you have with your book. I mean, don't think about your book as just the book. Think about it as an ebook, as an audio book. You could turn that world into an RPG game. There's translation rights. It could be optioned into a TV script one day. And when you're with a publisher, you better read that contract real good to know what rights are yours and what rights belong to that publisher, because now as the indie author, I don't have to deal with any of that. It's all me.
Right.
So that was a big, so now, I mean, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of learning, but I was for that because it was something I was going to have to learn anyway. So I might as well, I might as well be the wheelhouse. Yeah.
I'll show you something with my traditional publishing. So this is the first book that I published, other than little ebook. And
right.
this is with Alpha Books, which is Penguin Publishing. Look at the back cover. Do you see me on there? No.
Nope.
No, it doesn't even have my picture on it.
Wow, rude.
You know,
rude.
and that's, I mean, it's an example of where I would have chosen a little bit of a difference on that branding than what they chose. And I did not get a say in that. Now, they're a big publishing house. They don't actually care what I think.
Right.
I did a second book with a publisher, Gardening Like a Ninja, kind of spun off of this one actually. And they did a lot more of what I wanted because they were so small that it was like their graphic designer guy, he actually used elements from my self-published books because I asked him to, and I wanted to keep the branding the same. So I had a lot more input on that because I was literally working directly with the editor and directly, like the main editor, editor, and with the creative designer. Was like texting me ideas. So I got a lot more of that, but I did have to fight for it and I did have to ask for it. And I don't think that I would have had that insight and ability if I hadn't self-published in between. See, I published this one and then I co-authored the next book in this Living Free guide series. They did like a whole series on self-sufficient living. And I was co-author for one because they needed, the other author was technically very proficient in the skill that they were covering, but they wanted someone with more personality, which I have in spades. Literally by the time between this book and that book, I wrote, produced, and published 3 self-published books, 1 ghostwritten and 2 in my own name and branding. After turning in that before it ever hit the shelves.
Wow.
Because I could move so much faster as a self-published author. And to me, that's probably my favorite part of it, is the fact that I have control over the timetable. And at that point in time, my kids were really little. So we weren't doing like soccer and music lessons and art classes and all the things that you do when you have 5 kids all in the late elementary, early teen years. You know, everyone's like junior high, high school, and upper elementary. So everyone has things, you know, Boy Scouts and church and all the things that you do when you're a mom. Like I spent a lot of time in my car chauffeuring. And I was just talking to a friend though. She actually has been writing her books by recording them because she's a mom of 5 like I am. And so I was like, how are you actually writing books? Like I'm busier now than when my kids were running around in diapers. And she said she's not writing. She's recording her stories and having them typed up. Yeah, she's doing dictation, and then she's sending them to Rev. And she's producing books like crazy. But self-published, you can move that timetable to whatever you need it to be. When I was doing this book, sorry, I have a parrot.
I was wondering, where's
I thought maybe like one of your kids was in the background, like making some noise. I was just waiting.
My kids out of the house. They're like in the backyard eating dinner, camping with their dad because I didn't want them to know. But I have an African gray parrot, so he's mad at me because I didn't get him out. When I wrote this book, I ended up in the hospital for a week with gallbladder issues. Like I got admitted to the hospital and I had surgery and I was there for 7 days, plus then, had to recover from the surgery. So I called my editor because the book was due and I'm like, okay, here's what's going on. Can we push the deadline a little bit? And he's like, well, let me talk with the team and see what we can do. You know how much time extra they gave me on my deadline? 2 days.
2 days?
Not 2 weeks. 2 days.
Oh my God.
It was due on a Friday and I got till the next Monday to turn it in. And then I didn't see the book for 9 months after that. Because that's how long it takes them to move. It's insane. The slow pace that the timetable of the publishing world.
That's
like
crazy.
You can sign your contract, work your butt off to meet that deadline, and so you turn it in like 6 weeks or whatever arbitrary time they get, and then you don't see it again for 9 months. And like I said,
I believe in building hype, but that's crazy. Like like maybe like 30 days, because people have short attention spans. Like this making people wait, like it's not like we can launch a movie preview that people are going to see like every 30 seconds because ads are on everything, like we're authors. So it's like, I'm going to tell you about my book. It's coming out. Like, I feel like 30 days is pushing it sometimes with people. And there's so many books. So that's crazy.
Yeah. And like I said, by the time it actually hit the shelves, I had already self-published 2 more books and ghostwritten something for a client. So I was like, oh, this is how it works. I'm all over this. And I think for me, the control of the time is probably my favorite thing about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's definitely, the parent in the background is awesome. Like he too would like to chime in and let everybody know.
He's taking it over. Yeah, I was like trying to mute myself. He also does the Hunger Game whistle, like Rue does. He can totally do that. Dude. I'm just waiting for him to break out and you guys look for the arrows or something. Under attack.
That's amazing.
Not that kind of apocalypse, you guys.
Yeah. I used to have a friend that had an African gray and it made the backing up sound of the garbage truck, and so we would just be sitting in her living room and hear it, and someone would be like, hey, your bird's backing up.
Oh yeah, no, he can do like the microwave, the coffee maker.
Oh wow.
Anyway, what would you say for someone who's trying to get into self-publishing, whether they've had writing experience or not? What would your tips be, and like if you were mentoring someone to help get them started?
That is an excellent question.
Yeah. There are a bunch of resources online. So here's a few that I would recommend. Joanna Penn at The Creative Pen. She's phenomenal. She's got a podcast. She's got some of her publishing books on how to self-publish for free as well. I highly recommend her. Get on Jane Friedman's mailing list. Her newsletters are the bomb. Her blog is an excellent resource as well for traditional published authors too, but definitely. And Mark Dawson, I think he's also a really great resource. He runs some courses for self-publishing, for ads for authors. He's got a podcast as well. I think it's a self-publishing university that he does. So it's just the hard part is being a writer. Everything else I think that we can learn. Even if you're not really kind of business minded, you still have to be as an author. And I feel like if you're maybe not that big business minded, to me, that would almost be more of a push for you to kind of get into indie publishing, especially if you don't want to spend a year reading that contract that the publishing company is going to give you to make sure you're not getting screwed, and you can't, and you can't afford a lawyer. You know what I'm saying? So to read it for you, because there's just, especially because there's so many, resources out there now for indie publishing to help you. I mean, there's other writers in the community. There's, what we're doing right here today. There's book designers and editors, and there's just so much out there that would make this journey easier for you as an author. So I would start with those resources, try not to get overwhelmed, learn things bit by bit. I mean, but really it's just a matter, first you finish the book, then you find the editor, then you find the cover designer. And while you're doing all that, you're learning about marketing. And hopefully you're not only talking about writing on Twitter. That's the big writers. You are not just a writer. You are allowed to get on Twitter and talk about things that you are interested in. Takers off, V.E. Schwab, NJ, oh God, I'm saying her name wrong. She wrote The Fifth. I'm terrible with names. I'm a terrible human being right now. I need to Google her. But anyway, a lot of famous authors on Twitter that talk about things that are not just writing. You are allowed to be a varied individual. You are not just on Twitter or any social media platform to connect with writers. You need to connect with readers. Like, my fans have come from jumping into conversations about geekdom. Like, I followed this podcast called Who Would Win, and it was like Luke Skywalker versus like Captain America. And I was like, Luke Skywalker all day, every day. And we're having it now. I've got followers who are talking to me, and I'm talking to them about my books, So that's how, that would be the big, it probably goes into marketing, but I went on a rant, I'm sorry. But that's just, because it drives,
anyway. Connect with people in any way you can.
Yes.
Yeah. I would say, kind of on a similar note, to keep up to date on the new stuff that's coming out, or just, keep looking for things that you've never seen before. Like, I don't use Scrivener, but I want to, because I just actually recently learned about it a few months ago. And when I first started indie publishing, I went through lulu.com, and I was doing that for years and getting like 0 book sales, and I was just struggling so hard with it. And then last year I found out that you can publish through Amazon, and it's so much easier. It is so much more straightforward. And as much as I loved Lulu's, their customer service is phenomenal. Like, I would have weird off the wall questions and they would get back to me the next day. And so that was very helpful, but their interface was just not as helpful as Amazon's is, so just keep your eyes open for different things and don't lose hope. I mean, even if you put a book out there and it's been a year and you've only sold 5 copies, that's 5 copies that people have because you wrote it, because you did it, so just don't ever stop writing. Keep pushing forward.
I definitely think that the more you produce, the more people will find you. And I agree with you on the whole Amazon front too. You definitely want to be on Amazon. That's where people go when they think of books. And I've used Amazon to produce print books as well, print versions, not just Kindle versions of my book. And you can use CreateSpace where you're not even paying until it's published, which is kind of awesome because, they take, it's a trade-off. It's like everything else. They are taking more of the royalty percentage, but they're not taking it until they've actually published the book, which means that you're not paying anything out of pocket for that. So that's an excellent way to get started if you're just getting started, and you don't have money to invest in your writing. Once you get to the point where you can use your money from writing to invest back into your writing, there's ways that you can reduce those costs by paying, you have to pay more upfront and you get more in the long run. But in terms of writing prolifically, I've always found it doesn't matter what topic I publish on. If I write a new book, it will help sell more of my older books. The more you write, the more you sell. And the more you sell of your other stuff, not just the stuff that you just wrote, which I think is one of the reasons why series tend to do so well for authors. But I also think that for a lot of people, even across genres, if they find you and they connect with you in one way, then they're going to be looking for another way to connect with you again.
Right. Absolutely.
Another reason that I highly recommend, because you guys were talking about the different platforms you can publish on, like you just discovered Amazon and Lulu, and I remember all those back in the day. I want to remind people too that, there's always a lot of talk about being exclusive and going wide with Amazon. How you choose to do it, I would not recommend it, just because there are actually some bookstores that will actually not work with Amazon at all. So one of the reasons that I highly recommend Joanna Penn's book on self-publishing, because she takes you through her process and all the different kind of ways that she does it. What you want to do as an author, what I would highly recommend, is going wide, just because that gives you the most money or the most bang for your buck. So don't forget about Kobo WritingLife. Don't forget about Smashwords. Don't forget about Ingram Spark. Don't forget about Draft to Digital. I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff out at people, but just Google it. Yep. Google it, look it up, check it all out, because I don't use Amazon's expanded distribution for my books. I use them on Amazon's platform, and I actually use Smashwords for my expanded distribution for all my ebooks. So that's how I got them on like an Apple and like Kobo and all that kind of stuff. Just because it also, I think, and when I did Kobo, I use when you put up your ebook on Kobo WritingLife, it will actually let you adjust the pricing internationally, so it's not stupid. So like if your book is priced 99 cents here in the US, it's not like a stupid number elsewhere. So it'll let you actually adjust those pricing numbers so they match the markets over there. So a lot of different resources out there for indie authors. It's on the business side, but it's stuff that you can really easily learn. And it didn't take me long to do it all. Like when I did my book through Kobo, it only took me like maybe 10-15 minutes to get everything set up. So it's not like once you learn it, it's fast.
Yeah, once you get your login credentials for all of those different places, it's really easy to put your next book in there. But I definitely agree that having multiple platforms for your work, it's kind of like you would never want to only be on one social media channel. You want to be found wherever it is that your particular potential audience member is looking. Maybe she only hangs out at Facebook. Maybe she hates Facebook because she hates Facebook and she's only on Instagram. So you want to be all of those places. But once you get those platforms set up, it's pretty easy to plug in new information. What do you wish that you had known when you first published your first book?
Do it slower.
Yes.
Just because it's done, right?
And read it again.
Just because it's done and you're super excited about it doesn't mean that it's ready for you to put up on Amazon.
Yes.
Do it slower. Learn about what an actual book launch is. I still have that problem. Like, learn about timing and the market and marketing. Just freaking do it slower.
Yeah. There's no rush, for sure. I would say the same thing. Absolutely.
Oh, gosh, I wish I'd known that.
you get so excited. It's like,
I know, it's like,
yes, baby, go.
I think for me, just kind of trying to get back into it. I had a physical injury that kept me off the computer a lot. And then I'm like you, I'm a content creator. So it's like at a certain point, it's like when I'm online, that's when I'm making money, not investing in the writing so much. And so I've really had to go back this first year. And I think that's a lot of the reason why I decided to break from what I had been doing with my nonfiction work, and I just had to do something completely new and tackle the fiction side of things. But I wonder how each of you kind of makes that decision about what the next thing is that you're going to work on. For me, it was kind of just a mental cleansing. Like I needed to just step back from what I had been doing and create a new system for myself and tackle something new that was more of a challenge for me that I hadn't done yet, because I always like a new adventure. How is it that you've come to be working on the book that you're working on, and then what are you looking forward to in the future?
Well, I would say for me, it's just I have my multiple projects that I'm working on at one time. And so sometimes that actually works in my favor, because if I'm working really hard on my psychological horror novel, I start to get burnt out on it, and so I need to step away from it, but I want to keep that writing flow going. So then I'll jump into the cyberpunk novel, and luckily I have a very organized way of keeping all my projects separated, just in my own mind. Um, so I'm able to bounce back and forth pretty easily. And that's what helps me. But I mean, sometimes you do get into those funks where you don't feel like writing, you don't have the inspiration or the drive. And so I think in those moments when you really can't do it and you try to force yourself and it's not working, that you need to take a step back and take a break, because you're going to burn yourself out and then writing's not fun anymore. So I think it's definitely important to know when is a good time to start working on self-care. And then as for what I'm looking forward to in the future, just keep on putting stuff out there, just keep writing my heart out and connecting with people through my work. That's what I'm always excited about.
I love that.
I need to read your nonfiction book on witchcraft too, by the way, Jamie. I'm very excited about that. Yeah, I'm trying to learn more, and also I want the fourth book in my series to be like witches versus cyborgs, and I want it to be like really authentic to witches. Right. Yeah. So I like doing research.
That is an awesome combo. I like that.
Yeah, I think it would be cool. I'm team witches, but I might be a little biased. I got to make sure the writing's not biased. But yeah, I'm really I need to check out your work. So I think I took like a life break. That's why there's such a big gap between book 2 and me trying to finish book 3. And I don't like that there was such a big gap, because I've always kind of been a writer. Like I took myself seriously at it, and then I wrote those 2 books, and then life just happened, and now I'm like 8 years later maybe, and it's just like, wow, where did time go? So I'm really in the process now of getting back into healthy habits as far as writing goes, and juggling everything else, and businesses, life stuff.
Yeah.
So when I jumped back into this, I'd actually gotten really sick a couple years ago, mentally and physically. It was just like terrible. And then after that, I was like, no, we're doing this. So I relaunched my series. I got new editors for it. I got new covers for it. And that's why I did the crowdfunding as well, to help me get the books into print and help offset some of those costs. And then I just dove right back into book 3. And I really loved it. Hilariously, I had about, I want to say like 5,000 words of something, and I hated it. I had like a complete writer diva moment, almost set it on fire. Like I literally wanted to just take the manuscript, just set it on fire. So I tossed that aside. I've got this concept now. I'm in love with it. And now I'm realizing the thing I wrote wasn't that bad. So I'm probably going to end up finishing it and like releasing it as like a free novella, like to bridge the gap between book 2 and 3, now that I'm done like being like a child and throwing a temper tantrum over it. So I'm just really excited about writing again, which is awesome, and just really committed to, even with all my stress and craziness going on, just building those healthy writing habits and making a commitment to it. And even though it's not, paying the bills, making it a priority, because it is important. And that's what I wanted one day to do. So I have to treat it like it is this important thing in my life if it's going to become that. So it's just about that. And then I've got a bunch of story ideas in my brain. They won't stop talking to me. So clearly I got to keep writing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Never stop writing.
I can very much relate to the break. And I think trying to figure out how to get past your own mental hangups, like I was extremely prolific with a newborn, with like 5 kids, and I could outwrite anybody. And then my house flooded and my back blew up. And so I had physical and outside stressors both at the same time, and trying to reconnect with that writing and that creative side of myself was a little bit of a process. And it started with art, physically painting. And then it's kind of just helped me like, okay, if I could do that I don't want to say I don't care about as much, but it's not what feeds my soul in that way. then just kind of gave myself permission to like, okay, I'm just going to try something new and get back in the habit of writing, reconnecting with the writer community through this conference and other things. And I think, it's actually very encouraging to hear, like, I'm not the only one going through that, like, weird, weird gap. Like,
yeah, I envy all these writers that are kicking out 1 to 2 books a year, because I actually published my first book in 2008, the second one in 2012, and now here we are in 2020, and I'm working on writing the third, and I'm just like, what am I doing with my life that I haven't written like 20 books already? Like, what is this? So I'm like determined now.
But you see, I think the secret to that is you have to sell your soul to the devil, because I don't understand how anyone could just do that. I don't know how it's humanly possible, but I guess it is.
I guess. I don't know.
Well, we are coming up to an hour, and I super appreciate both of you making the time to connect and share your tips and your thoughts, and just the motivation of hearing what is inspiring other people and what other people are going through. Personally, I found it very encouraging to know that I'm not alone in this. And I just, if you have any last parting tips or words or encouragement to share, and then make sure that you tell people where they can connect with you on Twitter and follow you there as well.
I think one last tip I would give is just kind of, when it comes to getting your book out there, think outside the box. I'm a big fan of guerrilla marketing, so buying your own author copies and then just leaving them places. I call them dead drops.
That's
like
awesome.
You just go to a cafe and you just leave it there with like a page earmarked somewhere, and then people just randomly pick it up, and it's getting your work out there, and it's also kind of fun just to do stuff like that. And also, little flyers and stuff that you can just print off, or bookmarks, just really think outside the box and make it fun.
Absolutely. I will say that I guess the last kind of parting tip to authors would be about crowdfunding, because I just successfully managed to do that, and I didn't think that it would be as successful as it was. So I raised a little over $2,000, and just a reminder, I am not a best-selling prolific author. I'm just an indie author. I've got some books out there. I've had some success, I guess, because people have bought them before. I've got about 4,000, a little over 4,000 Twitter followers, 150 YouTube subscribers, and I successfully raised it. So people will support you if they care about you. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to strike up conversations. Don't be afraid to introduce yourself as a writer, because you never know where those opportunities, may lead. My books have also been optioned to be made into an indie TV series. That's been a project that's been in the works for like 12 years. And that literally started because I was working in a hotel. A guy came into the hotel, and I just told him that I was a writer. So don't be afraid. I know writers are very kind of, introverted. Be extroverted for like 5 seconds a day, just to say, I'm a writer. This is what I do. Build those connections with people. Don't just talk about your writing. Just remember that people will support you if they care about you, and then they'll read your book, and then they'll support you because they love your writing. So it kind of, especially for indie artists, I think it kind of really starts there, because there's so many of us, and we're all kind of like not fighting for space, but like we're all like in the kind of same space, putting our work out there, and there's only so many readers. So that's it. You guys can find me over on Twitter at WriterStreamer. And then from there, you can find me everywhere else. My website is crystalsimagination.com.
Jamie, are you on Twitter?
Yes, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I just got on BookBub, but all of my tags are J Weaver Writes, or my handles, so you can find me that way. And then my author website is jweaverwrites.wix.com. I haven't bought my own domain, again, very broke, but yeah, getting there.
The struggle is real.
Yes.
It is a worthwhile investment as soon as you can, though.
Yeah.
For sure.
For sure.
And I am AngeEngland.com. I'm Ange England on Twitter and everywhere. And we look forward to any of your questions and stuff. I think there's a forum that you guys can drop questions, and we will try to chime in and answer them as we're able.